Very good afternoon. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving EIL the opportunity to be part of this conference. And on behalf of EIL, we would like to present here some aspects of multi-product generation from coal, particularly via gasification, and touch upon the alternate route of making natural gas through catalytic gasification. Respected Chairman Sir, my fellow speakers, the opening note is exactly the way India stands today. India, being a large and growing economy, does need to look at alternate sources of meeting its energy demands. And what better route can it have than to monetize coal? So just a few statistics, perhaps these have been repeated earlier on. To put it in the context of the alternate end uses of coal, we are the third largest energy consumer in the world. We stand at that position, but our average consumption of energy is only about 40% of the world's average. We are consuming about 6% of the total global energy use. So needless to say, we stand at a position where the consumption of energy, along with the population and the GDP growth, is bound to grow. India is energy deficit. It imports a majority of its oil, 35% of its gas, and even though sitting on huge reserves of coal, still imports 34% of its coal requirement. We are a large consumer of oil and petrol. Fact lies in conversion of a low hydrogen to carbon ratio feedstock to a ratio of roughly 2, which is equivalent to liquid petroleum products. So add hydrogen, compress it, or employ techniques to add on and increase the hydrogen to carbon ratio, which is equivalent to liquid fuels. This is the challenge of technology, which is indeed intensive in capital, intensive in exhaustive flow schemes, exhaustive capex, and the end value is derived essentially by substituting other sources of fuel with coal. So the technological aspect of coal to other fuels lies in the efficient production of large-scale chemicals, particularly challenged by the transfer of hydrogen to the carbon molecule. Needless to say, gasification is the core technology towards meeting wide-ranging products, be it the carbon monoxide chain, the methanol, which is a vast chain of various products, whether it is chemicals, it is used for automotive and for olefins, propylene, conversion of syngas to valuable hydrogen, used in refineries and fuel cells, conventional usage of syngas towards power generation, and as the SASOL projects, the variety of technologies employed there to product of diesel, naphtha, and wax by the FT synthesis. In particular, looking at Indian coals is a challenge. Yes, the technologies are there in place for monetizing coal, but looking at high ash Indian coal throws itself a challenge to the industry. Why so? Although it is low in sulfur, the Indian coal is having a high ash content. Roughly about maybe about 45% or 50% of the coal from various regions could actually be converted to value because of the ash content ranging from 20-25% to as high as 45-50%. Indian coal particularly is highly reactive, and therefore the high carbon conversion can be attained in moderate gasifier temperatures. This increases the system efficiency for overall carbon conversion efficiency to have more value of product per ton of pure coal. Of course, the reactivity of coal is a major determinant also of the way the gasifier is sized and the design of the gasifier. Typically, Indian coal has a high ash fusion temperature, and this is particularly required and to be understood in terms of the determination of the conditions within the gasifier. Clean coal technologies therefore convert part of the carbon present in the coal to various end usage. Important before we go to any of the end product synthesis, cleanup of the syngas which is produced from the gasifier is pertinent because of the poisons that it can have for the downstream catalysts. There are the other considerations like maintaining the inerts in case of ammonia synthesis, maintaining a ratio of carbon to CO to CO2 in hydrogen. In methanol, we need to have good control over a lot of poisons like cyanides, iron, acetylene, unsaturates, oxo-alcohol, and so on. So each of the end synthesis has a particular need for controlling the poisons, and thereby lies the detailing of each of these steps, starting from the SAR shift to cleanup, to CO2 removal, liquid nitrogen wash, as the process demands. So syngas is essentially CO and hydrogen. We look at pure CO separating from the syngas for end usage in the acetyl chemicals and polyurethanes, and we look at CO and hydrogen in a certain ratio which is stoichiometrically required for synthesis of methanol, SNG, ammonia, oxo-alcohols, or synfuel. Now these ratios thereby determine the flow schemes in the upstream, how much shifting has to be done, how much syngas needs to be bypassed from the shift to get to the stoichiometric ratio required for the particular downstream process. Now, these processes are some of them like methanol synthesis, ammonia synthesis are high pressure processes. Even the choice of the gasification technology would rest on the determined end use of the syngas. So in the larger game of the whole flow scheme development, it is required to identify the technology, upstream technology, which gives the right composition of the syngas and right pressure levels for integration with the chemicals. Now I'd bring forward a few aspects of the monetization of coal. One is using the FT synthesis as well as the DCL, direct coal liquefaction, for conversion of coal. Individually, there's a different efficiency level for indirect coal liquefaction, which is lower, which is about 48%, and a direct coal liquefaction by addition of hydrogen gives a higher conversion of about 60%. So we believe that the difference in thermal efficiencies and different in product quality is best synergized by a combination, a hybrid approach of the two technologies, whereby the integrated product quality meets the demand of any petroleum industry. It balances out the process efficiency and also the fuel quality by blending, improves the process flexibility, and maximize the target slate. So this is one approach looking at the CTL essentially per se by a combination of DCL as well as ICL. The second area of challenge is the FT synthesis. We know that low temperature FT is an ideal process wherein we have a good selectivity and yield of hydrocarbons, but the low temperature is also thermally challenged. So the better way in terms of thermal efficiencies is move towards a high temperature FT, thereby having products which are not as good quality. So the approach of a medium temperature FT shift is what is today in the focus in technology arena, which has been developed by Synfuels China, which balances out the heat recovery, gives better selectivity, and gives an ideal product slate. This is an iron-based slurry process, which is an intermediate. It brings both the benefit of efficiency and a good product slate. The next important thing, what was spoken, is SNG. Gas today in India's energy mix stands about 77%, which is because of its clean burning capability and lower CO2 emissions, is targeted to go to world average of about 25%. This is a challenge because we are today fourth largest importer of LNG. We are very low on enhancing our volumes of domestic production. Therefore, SNG, producing SNG from coal, high ash Indian coals, can be of strategic importance to the country. When we speak of SNG, we'd like to share a technology which is currently under advanced stages of research, which is the catalytic gasification, wherein the requirement of oxygen is minimum. This employs catalysts which are go to methanation reaction directly in the gasification reactor itself. The challenge in catalytic gasification today holds on the development of catalysts. There are several companies working in this direction, and perhaps if catalytic gasification were to find its place in the proven technology arena, this could change the very scenario of conversion of coal to clean synthetic natural gas. So comparison of the conventional gasification with catalytic gasification, essentially in the presence of catalyst, the methanation reaction shifts towards a lower temperature level. It has a higher thermal efficiency and a lower capital investment. These are some directional numbers which have been published, and comparison, a detailed comparison on a case-to-case basis needs to be made before any investment is actually in place. Particularly, SNG production could also be applicable to regions in India where we have coal, SNG feeding not to the main grid, but could be supplied for specific end usage in that same area. So it could meet regional demands and thereby meet the country's demand. The next is ammonia, which is also a huge volume produced from the coal gasification route, not in India. China, about 92% of ammonia in China is produced through the coal gasification route. There is a higher relative investment when we use the coal route in comparison to natural gas, naphtha, fuel oil. And also there is a higher specific energy requirement. But as was stated, since India is deficit in urea, ammonia could find its end use in urea or other fertilizers. The technically ammonia production from syngas has a few differences. The liquid nitrogen wash at the end of the chain actually produces almost dry ammonia, which is a challenge in terms of metallurgy. But it is inert free. It has no requirement of purge in the ammonia synthesis loop. The CO2 content in this coal-based feed is higher. So in terms of the balance of CO2 and hence the urea production is slightly more favored when we use coal as a feedstock. The next important chemical is methanol. Methanol, once converted from syngas, typically in a gas phase reactor, although there are developments in slurry phase, low pressure methanol synthesis as well, opens a plethora of chemicals. And the reaction or the mechanisms here is essentially exploiting ZSM-5 as a catalyst, zeolite-based ZSM-5, which actually cracks the methanol to DME, and then further it could go to olefins. These olefins can further be to higher olefins, which go to gasoline. So methanol is another chemical which is of very important relevance today in the country, which branches out to several end usage. China, for example, has several MTP plants, MTO plant, which has been recently commissioned. These are very challenging routes for olefin and propylene, particularly due to high investment. But considering that we are a nation starved of feedstock even for olefin production, like from conventional steam cracking, from naphtha feedstocks or gas-based feedstocks, therefore coal is an important feedstock which should be kept in focus in the larger game of things. Just a couple of more slides, sir. One is when we look at methanol and we look at its downstream chemicals, DME is one important chemical to be held in focus, particularly because it is burns like natural gas. It has a Wobe index which is similar to that. On the LPG, it handles well with LPG. Below 20%, there is actually no need to change any systems in the LPG infrastructure. So, of course, in the diesel, it is relatively tougher to substitute. So, DME is one chemical downstream of methanol, which can be partly used in the growing demand of petroleum products. Today, petroleum products are growing at the rate of nearly double digits, almost 10%, which means that we need to add significant refinery capacities in years to come to meet the gasoline and diesel demand. So these routes of coal to other usage like SNG and DME will actually reduce the pressures of the investments in the refining sector. At this point of time, I'd just like to bring to the audience that in Engineers India, we have been involved in, and we are currently working on gasification of Indian high ash coal. Technologies for gasification of ash up to 25% are proven, but when we talk of higher ash, which is higher than 25%, there has been research done by BHEL, and we in partnership with Thermax and BPCL have a small gasifier in our complex, wherein which has a capacity of about 150 kg of per hour of coal, and it has a complete system. And herein we are looking at primarily with the objective of FT synthesis. Internally we are looking at other options as well other than FT, which in current crude prices may not find it a break-even investment. These are some pictures of the plants that we have at the R&D center in Gurgaon, which are currently under combustion mode of operation. So to quickly sum up, the routes for monetization of coal through gasification and conversion to liquids and other value-added products is a challenge in terms of sourcing, the need for market, study the location of the project, and in the larger interest of energy security. These are complex, high investment projects and need to be examined in case-to-case basis. Definitely, considering the future carbon emissions in perspective and looking at CO2 fixation, these are more friendly in terms of the environment, and in future would be of much value. We need to have some strengthening of the R&D environment, particularly for low pressure methanol synthesis, for handling high ash coals and certain other areas. These are high investment projects, and therefore collaborative approach with various partners who share the risks, mitigate the risks are probably important. And of course, monetization of coal to other than power sector needs to have policy imperatives in place so that it can give impetus to clean coal technologies in the future. So with that, I thank you for your attention.